Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the channel. We are talking about the Detroit Lions because they hired Drew Petzing as their offensive coordinator earlier today. I was at the gym. They were replaying the Texans-Patriots game, and I saw, scrolling on the little ticker there, Drew Petzing, officially hired by the Detroit Lions. I was looking up there at it, and I said, no way. My mouth was agape. My jaw was on the floor. No way. There's no way they just hired Drew freaking Petzing. I was pissed off. I was super pissed off they hired Drew Petzing. I've since come around to it. And I won't BS you because I feel like I BS'd in Lions videos at this time last season. When they hired John Morton, I was not enthusiastic. It was one of those hires or one of those moves. You know what it actually kind of reminded me of? It reminded me of making Pittsburgh Steelers videos a couple of years ago and having to try to think of a way that Kenny Pickett was going to work. John Morton got hired, and his play calling duties were quickly relinquished. I think either of those two words are applicable. If you're wondering what John Morton's up to now, Dan Campbell said he's helpful up in the booth. He's a consultant for the Denver Broncos. Now, obviously, their season's still going on, and the Lions season's been eliminated, so I don't mean anything about that joke. In fact, I don't think it was even funny. But there was one thing missing with the Detroit Lions last season. They didn't look like the Detroit Lions. So we can sit here and we can talk about points per game. We can talk about passing yards per game. We can talk about Jared Goff's season. We could look up anybody's statistics for the most part. But you would come around to the point if you watched the team last year. Excuse me, I got to throw this in. They didn't look like the Detroit Lions. And my opinion is because the run game was horrible, and stats will back that up. The Detroit Lions ranked 14th in rushing yards per game last season, and with a roster of Jahmyr Gibbs, who didn't have any meaningful, serious injury, if I'm not mistaken, this past year, and then obviously David Montgomery, there's no way, shape, or form the Detroit Lions should be anywhere. To be honest with you, if I have to be a little dramatic, there's no reason the Detroit Lions should be anywhere around top 10 in rushing yards per game or any valuable rushing metric, let alone 14th. So they hired Drew Petzing, and like I said, I didn't like it because Arizona Cardinals fans, so he was the OC for Arizona the last few years. Arizona Cardinals fans hate him. But one thing I kind of learned quickly on to covering the Cardinals specifically last season a little bit more closer, because I'm pretty big, still am pretty big on Jonathan Gannon as far as a defensive specialist goes. Just seems like maybe he's more poised to, or is just set to be a defensive coordinator. Maybe Jonathan Gannon's just one of those guys. Cardinals fans didn't have much to root for this year, and their issues were just pretty much team related. Petzing does one thing very good, and that's run the football. The Arizona Cardinals this year, I should have pulled up their statistics, but I didn't because I know that James Conner got injured, around, midway of the season, and Kyler Murray got injured, around midway of the season. Marvin Harrison Jr. was dealing with injuries, and, we know of Arizona as, Jacoby Brissett, Michael Wilson, final month of the season, fantasy football. These guys are like, fantasy league winners. So I know he can run the football because I remember what they did last season. They were so good at running the football 1 year ago, and I think they were good in the first couple of games, but Arizona they were a bad team this past season. I was very wrong being optimistic about them. But yeah, it's not good when your OC's play calling duties get relinquished halfway through. I made a Mike McDaniel video on this channel a couple of days ago. Actually, I think I'm going to collab video this with Will Upton Lions and Wupton Alt. Welcome to the channel. We've only got 44 subs, so hit the like button, hit that sub button if you haven't already. Trying to get to 100 subscribers, hopefully by the end of January. I've got this channel here to explore more niche-related topics with my face here, as you can tell, to build more of a community on the channel because that's just, I don't know. I dropped that ball over on Will Upton, so I'm playing around with these. Hopefully the mic is fine. I've had some really bad Wi-Fi issues with that whole Verizon crap, but Mike McDaniel, Mike Kafka, Arthur Smith, Jake Peets. We talked about these guys a couple of days ago on this channel, and I was very big on Mike McDaniel joining the team because I think Mike McDaniel is a brilliant play caller or brilliant offensive mind, and I don't think Tua's the best QB out there, so maybe him being in an OC role would have helped, but he honed in on Petzing, who is a Kevin Stefanski pupil. He's worked with Kevin Stefanski, more known before his tenure with the OC at Arizona. He was with the Minnesota Vikings. Oh, here we go. The Cardinals rank 6th in EPA per rush and 7th in offensive rushing success from 2023 to 2025. He's worked with Kyler Murray and Jacoby Brissett, two completely different quarterbacks. And Jacoby Brissett, especially, there was a stretch in this past season where he was a hot commodity in fantasy football. He was doing his thing. They were still losing, but he was whipping it, ripping it. Trey McBride, Michael Wilson left and right. I thought I had a run statistic, but I guess not. I've just got their depth chart here to my left. And, one thing I am hopeful about the Detroit Lions moving forward is I think the worst is out of the way. You can't blame an entire season on an offensive coordinator. It just kind of reminded me of, was it Anthony Lynn, the first OC that Dan Campbell hired back in 2022? I just didn't really love the move. I didn't feel like it was very fun. Drew Petzing is kind of this, rising name. And like I said, Cardinals fans really, really hate the dude. But like I said, they haven't had much to root for recently, so I can't blame them. But Petzing, he's inheriting one of the best rosters in the National Football League. And one thing to keep in mind is whether it was Kyler Murray or Jacoby Brissett, he likes run and play action. Because he runs the football, he's a run-focused offensive coordinator, he loves play action. And Jared Goff loves play action, and the Detroit Lions love to run the football. And Dan Campbell said, first order of business is to get this run game back. Let's get back to being a run-first team. And, even I don't have Jahmyr Gibbs statistics to the left of me. I'm sure they're good. I don't think they were great, but I'm sure they're perfectly fine numbers. But I compare Jahmyr Gibbs on the same caliber as I would Bijan Robinson, and impact-wise, didn't feel that this past season. The first game against my Packers, he's 7 catches for 11 yards. I mean, that's just a horrible statistic. Maybe not in a PPR league, but that's just horrible. Tate Ratledge and Christian Mahogany are very young offensive linemen, and it was their first real gigs. Mahogany's left guard, first real gig at a starting opportunity in his second year, and Tate Ratledge was a rookie out of Georgia. So they're young, and when your center retires out of nowhere, and that's a huge issue. It's just a huge issue. That was the most inconvenient timing possible. Frank Ragnow's retirement absolutely shafted the Detroit Lions, and I'm sure their season, it probably would have had a similar outcome, but I'm sure some of the intricacies of what we saw this past season would have been much different if they had a more solidified center position like they had assumed they did. Miles Frazier is so young. Tate Ratledge is so young. What can they really give you compared to last year's offensive line with Frank Ragnow and Kevin Zeitler? You're going to see a drop-off. So that's kind of why I said, I think that the worst of the illness with Detroit, I think it's out of the door. Right? I think it's out of the household here because these guys are only getting better. And Tate Ratledge especially, I'm very high on him. I would love to see more Isaac Slaw this upcoming season. I think I speak for everybody. But even Amon-Ra St. Brown, I didn't really feel like he had a good season. I didn't really feel like Jameson Williams had a good season. The Sam LaPorta injury was devastating. And once again, for the second straight year, defensive injuries just added up. I mean, it's crazy what's going on in Detroit, especially in this secondary. It looks like you guys have a estimated cap of negative $23 million. Oh, here we go. Here's a statistic. Detroit ranked 20th in run block win rate and 30th in pass block win rate. So they really suffered without Frank Ragnow and Kevin Zeitler. I had another one here. Taylor Decker. The Lions are probably going to move off of Taylor Decker if he retires. Okay, that's obvious. Taylor Decker might retire. And I'm not saying I hope he does, but if Detroit doesn't move off him, if he doesn't retire, here we go. He's 33 this upcoming season. He's had some shoulder issues. In 2025, he fell to 45th out of 69 ranked tackles in pass block win rate and ranked 61st out of 69 in run block win rate. So the whole offensive line, outside of the superstar right tackle, not good. So I know it sounds silly, but Detroit didn't win at the line of scrimmage, offensively or defensively, but they still have a good roster. They're still well coached, even without John Morton and OC, and that's where you see just a pretty fine year when it's all said and done. 9-8. Nobody's happy about 9-8, but nobody's saying like sell the team at 9-8. Another quick comment. I'm feeling the hiccups might be coming on. The defense, it's about to get younger. Roy Lopez was a really nice gem signing from this Detroit team this past year. I'm sick of having the whole edge conversation, and it just gets to a point, and I think this is the point. I think we've been past the point, to be honest with you, but Aiden Hutchinson's back. Aiden Hutchinson's healthy. We just saw him do his thing this past season. It's time to get somebody opposite. It doesn't need to be Micah Parsons or Myles Garrett or Trey Hendrickson, but there needs to be somebody on the opposite of him. Marcus Davenport and Al-Qadim Muhammad, super talented players. Davenport when he's healthy. Al-Qadim still pretty young, and I like what he offers. He's had some bursts for sure. He's a talented football player. But it's time to solidify that. And my guess would be in the first round, the Detroit Lions hopefully draft an edge rusher. I would think that's the most pressing need. Tyleik Williams was really the only youngster, the new youngster on that team, and he's playing behind DJ Reader, Meek Robertson, DJ Reed, Terrion Arnold, Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph. I mean, the safety injuries were just catastrophic. Let's see here. Cornerbacks, linebackers, Alex Anzalone is a free agent. I'm sure the Detroit Lions want to bring him back, but I'm sure a lot of other teams are also interested in Alex Anzalone. Can I get his age real quick? 31. He'll be 32 around the start of the season. So Detroit's in a decent spot. I mean, the cap sitch isn't great. They need to hammer home this draft here. They need to get in their bag Brad Holmes and find some talent that is able to just come in here right out of the gate and help them out. But at the same time, hopefully they use some type of maneuvering, with the contracts. I'm not too concerned about teams with negative balance sheets heading into free agency. I'm sure they can shore that up. And it's time Detroit gets back on track. And I think Drew Petzing is, some people probably view it as like a more vanilla hire as opposed to Ben Johnson. But I think Drew Petzing's going to bring some level of consistency with this run game that's going to help open up this passing game. And they should be back on track this upcoming season. This is a great step in the right direction. So I like it. I like the hire. And I don't think you can go wrong with Drew Petzing. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Hit that like button. Hit that sub button if you haven't already. Like I said, trying to hit 100 subs on this channel. Ideally, I bring this over to Will Upton one day in some type of format. But for the most part, I like talking about stuff like this and don't really do it on Will Upton. So let me know if there's anything you want down below. But I'll see you guys later. Peace.